Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Versus Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is a very special episode because Cliff Eidelman boards the mothership. You know him as the composer of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Eidelman. Thanks so much for coming to Versus Stars podcast.
Great to be here.
This is totally my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love of music and who are your earliest influences?
My earliest influences, very interesting. It would have to be a combination of the early Beatles albums. I remember getting the Yellow Submarine album at a park. There was some kind of bins lined up at a local park, and I picked up the Yellow Submarine, and I must have played that album so many times the needle must have been worn out on it. And I would also have to throw into that Beethoven's Sixth Symphony had a big impact on me, particularly the slow movement. From the minute I heard it, I even as a little kid listening to it, I think I was just kind of in a state of disbelief on how perfectly every single note seemed to be fitting together. You know, that a human being could come up with this sort of perfect composition that I'd have to say. So it's a mix. It was a kind of, those are my earliest memories of music.
In the way you can personally compose music, is it something that just kind of inspiration hits you, or is something that you can force? Because I know for composing a film, you have a certain timeline where that you have to hit, and how quickly you have to produce it. How naturally can you just kind of force the music to come to you?
Well, there's nothing like a deadline to help with inspiration. First, there's a lot of anxiety that goes with a deadline, but ultimately you just hope that something will come to you that, you know, raises the hair on the back of your neck. That's the best possible scenario. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes something will come quickly, and it's just like, oh wow, that's a nice theme, or that's a nice idea, or that'll work really well with this or with that scene. But most of the time, it's all a matter of sitting down for long stretches of time and trying out one thing after another and continually going at it and going at it and going at it until such time that many, many hours, sometimes many days have gone by, and all of a sudden something forms. Something forms in your hands. And it's really through just a lot of concentration and hard work. That's the truth of the matter. And then once that happens, then it starts to snowball. And then it's almost like that's the beginning of the little ball that's going to start rolling down the mountain. And then it starts to build and build on itself, and more themes start weaving out of it. And the next thing you know, you're writing a score. But it has to start off with a couple of good, ideas that hit you in such a way that you go, wow, that's going to do something really great for this movie. I think that's going to work. That's what it's like. It's like you're playing it, you're getting a little bit like, woo, it's doing something for me. You hope it's going to do something for everybody. Some people will listen to it and go, wow, that's great. Like something I felt. There's other people might say it's not so great, but that's why music is so subjective. Music is just hits everybody differently. But as a composer, you just have to go with your instincts and run with it.
So, for example, when you compose what we're mainly talking about, Star Trek VI, Undiscovered Country, which is I think you wrote the best score of any of the Star Trek movies, and I absolutely love Star Trek VI. When you're getting that first ball to start forming, is it based on a theme from the movie? Is it a particular character you're latching onto? Is there a moment in the film you latched onto that's where the music's coming from? What's the first kernel that's developing that ball that you're talking about that starts to form?
Well, in that one, I started talking with Nick Meyer the director, um, and also he was part of this the screenwriting for that film as well. And it was essentially starting with a meeting where we were just discussing, the tone of the film. And he started describing to me that this, although he loves the fanfares and the music from the previous 5 films, he said this film is really not one of those films. It really is a different kind of film. And so he was basically giving me the license and saying, you really don't have to, as great as all that music is, you don't really have to follow it as a guide, because this is not really that movie. It's a different kind of film. And it was going to be much darker. It was going to be brooding. It was going to be something more mysterious. It was going to have aspects of a cloaked ship that you can't see, and it was set in it's kind of the Cold War in space, and it was just kind of this coming to its conclusion or at the time, but it was a darker experience. So he started to describe to me and that was the first thing. And I still wasn't hired to do. I was just trying to get the job. This meeting was really just sort of see if I can get my foot in the door and come in with something that could win the job for me. And there's a lot of things I learned about how the door opened for a composer like me to get in that door, and which I could tell you about afterwards. But I'll just say that he described to me the opening of the Firebird, which are just these low basses, and it's just mysterious and dark. And I thought, okay, I know that I could I see the inspiration behind that sort of dark opening, brooding. So I certainly didn't copy it, but it was telling me the tone. He was giving me an idea of this sort of darkness of the opening, and so I went home that night and I came up with a main title, what could ultimately be the main title. And I called him the next day and I said, I think I've got the main title of the film. And he said, well, come on over, because I think he was leaving for London that night. And I showed up and I played him what I had come up with, which had all kinds of things in it. It had a dark opening. It had this. It had a build that built into a kind of a rhythmic structure that kind of showed sort of energy, but always in a kind of slightly more mysterious tone. Never sort of as bright as previous films. It was always kind of cloaked in something. And I saw Nick kind of just pacing the room and listening to it. And when it came to its conclusion, he sat down, and I think he felt that he was heard and understood. At least that's what he told me many years later. I think he felt understood, that I was listening and responding to him, and bringing that into the form of music. So it wasn't long after that I did end up getting the job, but it went through all kinds of. It wasn't as simple as, okay, you've got the score, now go ahead and write it. It went through another period where there was an idea that Paramount Studios was going to possibly go to the Holst family and license the planets to be to serve as the score for this. And my understanding is that it became financially not possible. And but I was certainly willing to be the arranger and just arrange pieces of the planets to create the Star Trek VI score. And but something inside me wanted to keep writing ideas and coming up with my own original material. And to my great fortune, the producers, someone from the studio, Nick Meyer, showed up at my apartment one afternoon, and I started playing them my material, which was utterly different from the planets, but I had already read the script and I knew the vibe of this film. And I was trying to go for something that was unique to this film. And one producer turned to the other and said, well, if we've got that, why are we trying to get the planets? That was the end of that. Also, because I knew it wasn't feasible. For some reason, they couldn't come to any terms for it. So the planets disappeared, and then it was go write a score, Cliff, your own original score, and that was it. That was so it was a bit of a unfolding of different things until I finally got the movie. I was hired and told, write your own score.
Now, I'm going to paraphrase what Nicholas Meyer also wrote in his book, if you don't mind. He said, different composers approach how they score a movie differently. Mm-hmm. Some use music to emphasize what is already going on, some to provide emotion where there is none, or to foreshadow what is to come. While other composers to give music its voice in writing. So in writing your score for Star Trek 6, what was your intention of the film? Was it to foreshadow? Was it to create emotion where there wasn't any? Was it to give the film its voice? What was your initial concept for the film?
Probably a little of all of that. I was looking for a unique voice for this film, to make this film unique for itself. And so I was looking for a tone and a voice. And there were several, aspects to this film that were unique for coming up with thematic ideas. One is this idea of the cloaked, unforeseen, foreboding, conspiracy that was going on behind the scenes to undermine this peace process they were trying to push forward, even though it was there was a lot of skeptics involved. But the music was to sort of capture that foreboding feeling that had some distrust in it, that had some hope in it, that had some power. It's just the sheer force of undercurrent, which is what that was about. And then there was an Enterprise theme that was much brighter, and it was about a hopeful future. And it was very much in contrast to the cloaked, what I'll call the foreboding theme. And somehow once I kind of got into unraveling thematic ideas, the Enterprise idea started to emerge and come forward. And then there were other themes that started coming out, which was this Rura Penthe ice planet ideas, which was entirely this concept of the thought was that it was going to be very raw and percussive, and I even used the choir as a percussion instrument. Normally, you use a choir. In the main title, I used it with oohs and ahs, and it was just sort of as part of the color of the orchestra. Here, I was in the ice planet. I was using choral elements as drums, basically. So this is a hugely important musical theme, which was the Captain Kirk and Bones going down into an ice planet. And they were sentenced to Rura Penthe, which is about the worst possible prison imaginable. And then so as they were going down, I wanted to kind of give that rawness of where they were heading, this cold prison. And so one thought I had is, it sort of felt a little bit like To Be or Not to Be. And so being that Shakespeare played a big role in a lot of the dialogue, weaved very creatively by Nick Meyer pieced into the story that was just sort of brilliantly laid in there. I thought, well, to be or not to be. And I remember calling the linguist who does the Klingon, and I said, how would I say to be or not to be in Klingon? And he responded, I think he said, I'll call you right back. I got off the phone. He comes back and he says, it's tach pa tach be. I said, wow, that's perfect. Percussive. It's like hard hitting. Tach pa tach be. And I thought that's going to be a perfect percussive line. And so if you ever listen to it again, you'll see as we get to the ice planet, there's this vocal that's going along with the drums, and they're actually saying in Klingon to be or not to be, ta pa, ta pa, ta pa, and it just kind of goes on like that. So that was another sort of a thematic idea, and of course, others that were very, very important. One was this sort of hypnotic theme for Spock, this sort of meditation. He goes into a room and he does this like meditation, and he has a beautiful painting by Chagall on the wall, and he starts explaining it. And as he was doing that, this theme started to come to me, which was this kind of meditative Spock theme. But the funny thing is that theme then became this big soaring ice planet theme when you're up on the ice from this very high ridge, and it looks like it drops about 3,000 feet down, and then that's when the strings sort of soar into that theme. So it was used for not only a meditative purpose, but it was also used to kind of show this grandness. And this is after they got out of prison and they escaped and they got out into the big grand open air. So that became an important theme. And probably maybe the most important thing was the sign off. It was the battle, which was like a 10-minute battle at the end of the film that I had to sustain and continue to grow the music for 8 or 9 or 10 minutes without stopping, and just keep making the tension tighter and tighter and tighter until it gets to the very end. And they end up finding the cloaked ship using a creative method of it's basically tracking the exhaust pipe, and they have a word for it, but finally blowing up at the end into this victorious ending. But ultimately, the sign off, where all the characters that had been there for 25 years were basically signing off, saying this is their last voyage. And that was the culmination of 25 years at the time. And I felt a certain amount of responsibility for making sure that had a certain amount of I don't know how you'd put it, emotions of 25 years of being together, of taking 25 years of journeys together. It all had to be encapsulated into this ending piece. So there was a lot of important stuff. And I ended up doing like an 8-minute end credit or 7.5-minute end credit, putting all the different pieces together and weaving it into a suite at the end. But what was very, very nice about doing Star Trek VI is that I was never asked to be try to make it sound like this score, try to make it be like that, or anything. I was never asked to do anything like that, or try to make it sound like this, from Star Trek this or Star Trek that. So, and that's because Nick Meyer wanted to give me the freedom of seeing this film as its own unique world. And I felt, since it was the final film, so to answer your question, we're all influenced by everything. I mean, of course, I'm sure I was influenced by all the films that came before it. There's no question about it. I knew them and loved them, but I was given the reins to say, treat this one as its own color. And because this film was very different in tone and color, as I mentioned early on. So I had the latitude to explore and try to do something unique for this film. And having said that, since it was the final film from the original cast, I also wanted to make sure that I went back to the very first Alexander Courage theme and wrap it up and tie that line into the end of my to wrap it up. So I did quote it. Now that's different because I actually quoted it. I didn't like, oh, I'm influenced by it. No, I actually took the da 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 ba 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 bum. I actually took that and placed it in about, I think, in 2 spots for sure in the film. Definitely at the end to kind of wrap it up, and once when earlier in the film, because I felt like, you have to, kind of bring it full circle. And to me, that was the first idea of Star Trek. And then I was signing off at the end with my conclusion, but I wanted to bring back the very first thing anybody ever heard and bring it at the very, very end of it, kind of wrap it up.
Because I just want to say, like, in sign off, I definitely hear the original Star Trek theme. He pops up in there. That very I can't. Was it trumpets that makes that original thing?
Yeah, it is trumpets. The very, very ending, after I do the final bum ba da 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 ba da dum bum bum. After I get to my whole sort of ending, I end it with it comes to the yum bum ba da 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 yum bum, and I wanted to end it, sort of put a punctuation on it. So that was that had to be done, in my opinion.
Like I said, it was such a satisfying piece, sign off. And obviously, like we talked about the idea of the trumpet in the original series piece. Did you get, because I know you said you didn't directly get the influence from your piece. Was there a tendency to use some of the instruments that were used as also in this, that kind of also weaved it together?
You mean in my score, in terms of like the movies that came before?
As far as the instruments that were used, because obviously the trumpet is such a famous piece from them.
Oh. Yeah, the trumpet, that trumpet line that's in the original theme that Alexander Courage did, that didn't play any bearing on, oh, I want to use more trumpets, because that was not at all. I just knew that I wanted to bring that theme back at the end as a little punctuation mark. But really, it's just a big orchestral score, and if like the other ones before, that's the similarity, is we all used a big orchestra. All 5 movies prior to me used a big orchestra, and I wanted to do the same thing, because we had the ice planet in this film, and I wanted to use a lot of unworldly sounding percussion that and sounds of wind instruments that didn't sound like it was from our world. I ended up going to a warehouse. The percussionist his name is Emil Richards, and he had this gigantic warehouse of percussion from all over the world. And I said, Emil, can I come to your warehouse and just sort of tap on everything? And he said, sure. So he met me over there, and I knew he was gonna, and he played, on the session as well. But I went in and I just started tapping on all these most bizarre things you've ever heard, things that were so alien. But that's what I was looking for, complete alien, alien stuff. So I found about, I don't know, 12, maybe 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 different instruments that I wanted to employ and put into my score, particularly for all the ice planet sequences and Escape from Rura Penthe and all of that. to really give that alien sense that you were in this very strange world, because there were a lot of alien characters in that ice planet down below in that underground prison. So I wanted to capture that. So I think that was kind of unique to this film, and it's really just because the film lent itself to exploring that type of thing. And I also used choir in this film and utilized some linguistic Klingon text in the choir parts. So I think these were kind of new things for a Star Trek movie, having a choral element, as well as using the choir as almost like a percussive instrument. So but that's all coming from the tone and timbre and flavor of the film, allowing me to do that sort of thing.
Now, the interesting thing too is, almost going back to Sign Off a little bit, is that Sign Off is kind of, the ending of the movie is kind of interesting, and so is the piece that you played, Sign Off, on it. Mm-hmm. It's that obviously it's the end of these actors after 25 years. On the one hand, there's a sadness to it, but on the other hand, there's a celebration of what there was. Mm-hmm. When you were thinking about the piece, how did you determine how to balance the sadness of this being the end, but also this kind of celebration of what they accomplished?
I think that the music had to have both of that in there a little bit. I think I was probably leaning more closely to the culmination of adventures that they had been through, both good and bad, hard times, good times, and the friendships and love that they had for each other, and that yearning for adventure, and not really wanting to hang it up. They didn't really want to hang it up. Deep down, these were adventurers. Those were the characters, and they wanted to continue on, but they had to pass the torch, or I should say, pass the baton. And so there was a kind of an emotional feeling to that, not wanting to pass it, but yet they know they have to. But they, as Kurt said at the end, well, we saved the world as we know it. Once again, we've saved civilization as we've known it. So it ended heroically. I think it just had to have that, all of that packed into this theme. Quite luckily, I really didn't consciously at the time think all those thoughts. Honestly, I couldn't have done it. If I had to sit down and say, okay, it's got to have the culmination of 25 years, and it's got to have this heroism of all these journeys, and it's got to have this in it, and it's got to have that. If I had done that, I would have been absolutely, and I wouldn't have known what to do. But the fortunate thing is that maybe this is the great thing about being very young when I did this, is that I didn't second guess myself too much, and I just sort of went with all the emotion I had at the time. And went, oh yeah, that works. And it wasn't until after that I would listen to it and say, yeah, it seems to have all of that in it. But I didn't consciously think, oh, I've got to have this in it, and this has to be in it, and that has to be in it. So that would have been stifling if I had put all of that in my head. It's like, because then you put a laundry list together. You can't have music doesn't come from a laundry list of ideas, like, oh, it's got to have this and this. Music really comes from the heart and from a culmination of many, many, many hours of just kind of going at it, whether it's on the piano or on keyboards or whatever you're working with to compose the music. It's really just sort of at some point, you hope it flows out of you. And that's just kind of went with instinct.
Now, another interesting thing about the film is the Klingons. You mentioned a little bit about the Klingon and Voropente, but interestingly is that the Klingons have an interesting arc in the film. At the beginning, they are, we have negotiation, there's allies, there's that great scene at the dinner table where they're kind of, for the first time almost in the series, not viewed as the enemy. They're virtually good. They're potentially going to be allies, potentially. But then you got Chang, who is obviously the villainous throughout. Leads into, as you mentioned, the cloaked ship. When you're thinking about the themes of the Klingons, how did you try to figure out how to incorporate both aspects of their characters, that the species arc, throughout the film?
Yeah, I mean, this was an interesting mix because they're not just the bad guys. I mean, their moon Praxis exploded, so they were kind of put into a situation where they really needed to come to the Federation to kind of negotiate and make a deal, because they were their source of life energy was going to come to an end, so they were kind of forced into it. But having said that, they came to it, particularly particularly the president of the Klingons, who came to it with good intention and with a certain amount of trust that he felt he might be able to end 70 years of hostility, and so they both, so there was this challenge. It was kind of like they were nuanced in a way that I don't think they had ever been in the past. They weren't just the bad guys. Yes, they were brooding, there was the bad guys, but they were trying to make a deal and find a way towards peace. They weren't and then there was the undermining that was going on underneath it all. But so that made the Klingon characters kind of more complicated in many ways. I would say that the way that I tackled it was by creating that sort of brooding theme that had mysteriousness to it, because that sort of, to me, rather than approaching the Klingons as a a really energetic, dark, big orchestra, rhythmic kind of idea, which happened in earlier films and worked perfectly, because that was just beautiful the way it was done. In my case, I kind of stripped away all of that energy and just went into this kind of low brooding string line, this from cellos and basses doing this kind of line that was both mysterious and cloaked and had a little conspiracy in it, had optimism in it. It's kind of you trying to weave all of the complication of the situation. So really, when you hear the opening of the film, which leads to the explosion of the moon, it starts off with their theme. It doesn't start off with the Enterprise theme. It starts off with their theme, because that's where we're heading, towards the explosion. Although there as the main title progresses, there is elements of the battle that takes place at the end. There's a little bit of Enterprise in there. There's all these various things, because it's playing as the overture. It's the opening overture to the film, but it starts off with that cloaked idea, cloaked, dark, foreboding theme. So that's how I approached it, if that makes any sense.
Right, no, it does. That's
how I did it.
The one interesting about Star Trek 6 as well is that there are a lot of twists in the film, based on not only introduction of Chang, what he turns out to be at the end, the cloaked ship. I'm forgetting the name of the female Vulcan who has that twist later on. Is it Valeris? I think it's Valeris. When you're composing the score for something like that, how dangerous is it or how careful do you have to not give away the characters later on? Because the music obviously has to express who they are, give them their voice, but you can't give away the twist either with them. So how do you stay truthful to the character without potentially ruining the twist?
Great question. Very, very interesting question. that is really, you've kind of hit on the art of music composition, the heart of it, which is the idea, and the idea of creating this musical arc that starts here. You have a beginning, you have a development, you have a middle and an end, but you have all these characters that are inside there. And the question is, and this is really a compositional thing, you know, you don't want to give away story plot ideas too soon. You don't want to you don't want to be heroic before you're supposed to be. You don't want to make everybody feel like everything's going to turn out perfectly before it actually does. There's all of these things that as a composer you have to take in consideration and work with. Ultimately, when I'm carving out music, as I'm going through the story, if I have questions, I'll let's say it's a scene that involves the Enterprise leaving space dock. Clear All Moorings is the name of the cue or the piece of music that I came up with for it, and it is a moment where it's okay for me to say this is them and their element, and they're going back to space on a mission, regardless of how it turns out. Why not just let it fly? It's them going out, and it's okay. I'm not giving away anything. It's just a moment in time in the film where it allows the audience to enjoy that experiential experience of going out onto an adventure. Once there, and in this particular case, they're going to have a dinner where they get together with the Klingons, which is the most tense dinner of all time. And they sit down with each other, and you can tell it's just two completely different cultures that don't see eye to eye on much of anything, except the possibility that maybe they could find something that could be workable for the two of them. And that's the point of getting together. And they, so musically, very often I'll play the moment. It may have some tense in it, may have a little, almost a comical edge to it. It might have, but it's not giving away any plot lines. It's not saying it's all going to be great, everyone, enjoy. You're building on the story. I kind of see it kind of from the point of view of, rather than seeing it from a place of commenting on every little thing that happens, I kind of see it as the large arc, beginning, middle, end, and you've got this whole hour and a half or 2 hours of music that needs to tell the full story. And when you finally arrive in these different places, you arrive in them. But until then, you're still, keeping that theme for that. And you're not going to use this theme here yet because you want to save it for here, but it's still, so there's a little bit of intellectual thinking on it. The other thing is sometimes that's where a director can help. In the case of Nick Meyer, I might be in the middle of the film playing, and I'll play it for him ahead of time on the piano or whatever I had available to me at the time. And a director can also give insight, into whether the music should go longer and maybe connect us over here, or maybe stop a little sooner so that dialogue is clear, to not so that way that dialogue has its own space in the film and is not interpreted as part of this part here. So a good director like Nick was great with that, getting into the little weeds of detail,
Now,
by the way, I remember before he even shot the film, I did a spotting session on the script, which is where you decide where you're going to start and stop the music. Usually you wait till the movie's over and edited, or, and they give you the movie and you decide at that point where the music's going to start and stop. I actually gave it a shot on the script, and Nick went through the whole thing and made his own notes over my notes, saying maybe here instead of here, right on the script. That's probably one of the most unusual things to ever take place between a composer and a director, is doing a spotting session on a script. That just doesn't happen. I could say this with a lot of confidence. I don't think it happens very. It doesn't happen often.
How, like, because you're spotting the script and obviously editing has not happened yet, is there a concern that when you compose the piece, that so much of the piece that you want to have falls off because it doesn't fit anymore what actually happens on screen?
No, because once the film is getting edited together, everything that we thought we were going to do on the script, it becomes just like a thing of the past. And now we've got the film. Now we really know what we have, and we start working with that. And I never referred back to the script at that point. Once you got the film, you got the film. So I think in a way, it was, when I did that spotting session on the script, I don't even know if I was formally hired yet. It was really early. And I was probably trying to, get my hands more into it and show that I really wanted this job, and dig into the weeds of the script and send it to the director. And I, just almost like, even though I hadn't been formally hired at that point, I felt like I was going to be. But it was a way of saying, I'm kind of at work on it, thinking about it a lot. And what do you think of these ideas? It's like starting the conversation a little early, but starting it,
right. Now, once again, a great composer in many ways is just as involved in understanding the characterization of a character as the writer and director in many ways. Thinking about someone like Captain Kirk in this film, Captain Kirk for 25 years has pretty much, with I can't think of any exception, is 100% like your prototypical hero. He's your protagonist, he's your hero, he's almost in every single film that he shows up in or season. However, in Star Trek 6, he's a little less heroic. He says the lines, "Let them die, you shouldn't have trusted me." There's almost a thought for a moment, Meyer is playing with the idea that maybe Kirk really did fire upon the Chancellor. So when you're thinking about him writing the pieces that he's featured in, how did you approach it? Did you still view him as the hero? Did you view him as this kind of potentially damaged version of a hero? Like, what was your thought process?
I think for me, he was always a hero, but a hero with big issues. His son was killed, I believe, by the Klingons. He had missed his son. He expressed it in a scene in the film. So he had a lot of resentments built up. He's just a human being with flaws like everybody, and a certain amount of distrust for the Klingon Empire, but at his core, I always felt that there was something that good, and he was trying. In the end, he was trying to get to a good place. He was trying to overcome his biases and so forth, and it was hard for him because of his experiences and so forth. But I kind of felt like it just added to a complex character, not just like, here I am, I'm the hero, and I'm going to go out and save the world. No, he's a guy that's troubled and dealing with all kinds of issues and questioning all kinds of things and wondering if it's right or wrong. And there's this, he's a human being. He's not a robot, this guy. He shoots from the hip all the time. He's that guy that kind of goes at it like an athlete goes after a football, trying to make a touchdown when he has to, but gets tackled sometimes, on the way to the end zone. But ultimately, I felt like I kind of felt like the Enterprise theme. I always felt like that that clear all moorings theme, which is one of the very important themes in it, was kind of him. It was the whole crew. It was the whole crew. It wasn't just him, but he's leading that crew, and he has so much of that spirit in that chair in the middle. And that gleam in his eye when he always cut to that close up, and they always show him gleaming out into space with that sort of optimistic adventure in his eye. And that's what I think that theme was, even though he has all these other issues he's dealing with going on this particular mission in Star Trek VI. So that's how I kind of view it. I think throughout the film, though, he's certainly not always played in any kind of heroic way. I mean, I'm playing the story and what's going on, and I'm not so much commenting on every character, but more playing what the action is doing and what the subtext of the action is saying, and what's not being said is often the undercurrent in the music. I often feel like music's job is, in a lot of ways, to find a voice and that is there, but is important because it's adding so much. It's making everything so much more powerful or interesting or thought-provoking, and music can do that in subtle ways. And I did that often in this film, and sometimes in very outward ways, where it's very noticeable and it comes forward. So I'm one of those people who doesn't think that, only scores are good if they're unnoticeable. I don't believe that. I feel like sometimes they should be unnoticeable, and sometimes they should be somewhat noticeable, and sometimes come forward and really light the screen up. So I think it's not like it's bad if you notice it, it's good if you don't. I don't believe. I just feel like it's what the film is calling for. And if you can come up with something to elevate that film, that's really the key. You're really there to add the final interpretation, which is this musical interpretation to a story. Like your first interpretation, you have the script, and then you have the acting and the directing, and then you have this music that comes in that's basically putting this whole other meaning to it. It's adding layers and layers of meaning. So it's definitely sort of the I see it as sort of the last interpretation before it all gets mixed together and made as a whole. That's the beauty of filmmaking, I think, is that there's all of these things that come together, and if they come together well and they're all working with each other really well, that's the magic of a great film, I think.
And like I said, I really do think Star Trek VI is one of my, or is like the favorite score of mine across the Star Trek films. I really do think it really was amazing. How does it feel to have left that level of impact on a franchise that's been around now it's up to 40, 45 years, is it? I mean, maybe more than 50 years, maybe 50, it's 50 years, I think now.
Well, as composing is kind of a lonely job. You sit in your room by yourself and you're just off to the next project. And so it's, I seldom, I should say that Star Trek VI is probably, the score that people ask me about most. So I know it's on people's minds, and I know that I have made an impact for some people that are fans of the film and the franchise, and I feel incredible about that. I feel so proud to have been a part of that really amazing thing called Star Trek, and to have been part of the final one with the original cast. I couldn't ask for a better film, and to be part of the original cast means a lot to me. So that part of it is a great feeling, and I've taken it with me my whole life. Always enjoyed knowing that it's part of the things that I've worked on in my composing career. But often as a composer, I'm not with the audience very much or in front of them very much, and able to have communications where I'm be able to talk about it like I'm doing with you right now. And so that's kind of a seldom. Here and there I might have an interview or something where I'll talk about it and make that connection, but for the most part it's just like, okay, what am I doing now? And that's just kind of there, but it's just, don't think about it too much.
So what's next for you?
I have been writing a lot of concert works lately. I wrote a few years ago, I wrote my first symphony, which is Symphony for Orchestra and Two Pianos, which is everywhere. London Symphony Orchestra recorded it. I conducted it. And then I did another piece called Night in the Gallery that members of the London Symphony Orchestra recorded under my baton. And then and other concert works. I just re-recorded a piece I did back in 1997 called The Tempest, based on Shakespeare. We've been talking about Shakespeare and Star Trek 6. Well, I actually did a tone poem. It's like a 17-minute musical summary of the whole play, but kind of summarized in 17 minutes. And I re-recorded that with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra and this last year, as well as I recorded my second symphony, which is both The Tempest and my second symphony are going to be released. The second symphony will be released in December, I would say, late November, early December, and then The Tempest next year, sometime in April. Probably on Shakespeare's birthday, April 26th.
But when you say release, is it available on like iTunes and for purchase?
Yeah, you can download it, you can stream it. We'll likely not be making physical copies of it. It's just too laborious to do to find a good printer, and I love physical product, but I'm going to be it'll be all streamable. So that's what I've been mainly working on, and I've been thinking about another piece now as well. So I'm very open to more film scores if something pops and shows up. Because I love writing film scores too. So, but that's been the focal point of the last some years, is just really focusing on music that is just all about music and is not tied to a film.
Well, Mr. Eidelman, it's been an absolute honor to talk with you, sir. Thank you so much for being as good as I expected it to be.
Thank you so much. It was so great talking with you, Jeff. It's really wonderful.
Thank you so much. Have a been
nice reminiscing and thinking about music and a film that means a lot to me. So thank you.
And the Star Trek fans as well, because like I said, it's one of the, like, I love Star Trek 6. I love the score, and I just want to thank you so much for doing it. And you're welcome back anytime, sir.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.